We're gonna start this video out with a little game. In front of me, I have 3 watches. Some are similar, some are a little bit different, but I want you to guess what the next watch that I want to add to my collection is going to be. Looking at them for just a few seconds while I talk, where are your heads going right now? What do you think I'm gonna say? If you were thinking the Rolex Explorer 2, the newest reference 226570, then you got it right. And of these 3 watches, which one is the most similar on the table that I have not mentioned on the channel? That's correct. It is the Christopher Ward C63 Sealander GMT. I have it in for review. I want to give a huge shout out to Christopher Ward for sending this out for review. Unfortunately, I don't get to keep this, which is kind of sad because I have grown to super like this watch. But huge props to them for sending this out for review. If you're not familiar with the channel or you haven't been here before, hello. I love watches. I have a relatively small, I'd say, watch collection with some of my favorite watches being the Omega Seamaster and the Tudor Black Bay Pro. Those are actually my top 2 favorite watches right now. And the next watch that I really want to add to my collection is the Rolex Explorer 2. Something about that watch and the way it looks and how it is the least Rolex to me are just things that make it so appealing to me. When I saw that Christopher Ward makes an Explorer 2 homage, for lack of better terms, and when they asked if I wanted to have any watches to make some videos on, it was just kind of the natural chain of events to pick this watch out of all the ones to look at. So I've spent some time with it on wrist. I've gotten to get a lot more hands-on with it than just a quick glance at a shop. And I have a list of pros and cons and just personal preference things that I personally would change about the watch. So just quickly to get it out of the way, really quick on the screen right now, I got some specs on the watch. This is essentially just the short list of everything that you need to know numbers wise about this watch. And it brings me to my first pro about this watch. The sizing of this watch is phenomenal on my 6.5-inch wrist. Christopher Ward says it's 39 millimeters, and I would say that it wears roughly a hair smaller than my Black Bay Pro, both of them being 39 millimeter watches. The one thing about the sizing of this watch that is interesting is the dial proportion to the size of the case. When you look at it compared to some of my other watches, in specifics the Black Bay Pro being it's the same case size, the dial is larger and takes up more of the real estate of the watch face than say my Black Bay Pro does. It's a large white dial, and I've heard it compared to the same dial size roughly as the Rolex Explorer 2. I have a clip right here comparing the 2 of them side by side, so you can kind of look at the differences between them. The Rolex on the right is 42 millimeters and the Christopher Ward is of course 39 millimeters, but you can see how that dial proportion plays into the factor of how this watch is sized and how it wears. I wouldn't really say it makes it wear bigger. I would just say it plays with the proportions and it increases the legibility to be about the same legibility as a 42 millimeter watch, while remaining that 39 millimeter case size. It's been known that Christopher Ward's finishing is superb, and it's no different on this watch. I have only gotten to spend a good bit of time with 2 Christopher Ward watches, one of them being my personal 12, and then of course for the last week or so with this watch. And the finishing is different on both of them. I don't know how to word it, and this might sound weird, but the way and the depth of the brushing is kind of where I see the main difference. On the GMT, it is a little bit lighter and fainter while still remaining all the texture that you can see, whereas in the 12, I feel like the brushing is just a little bit deeper and textured than the brushing is on this watch. The case of this watch has various polished and brushed elements, and I believe that Christopher Ward calls this case their light catcher case. So really in whatever lighting you're in, you can kind of see glimpses of polishing matched with the more subtle brushing that they do. And overall, the finishing I think is absolutely insane on this watch. When you hold a Christopher Ward product, it genuinely feels like you are holding a product that is about 3 times as valuable as what the watch is actually worth. The finishing goes all the way down to the clasp, and it's a rather large clasp, which I don't know how I feel about it. I don't hate it, I don't love it, it's just kind of a neutral thing for me. The clasp finishing is super nice, and the micro adjustment system that Christopher Ward uses is honestly really good. There's a little pull tab that you pull, and that allows you to slide and move the watch, and it has various positions that it can stop in, and there's probably about a link's worth of adjustment in total that you can do on this clasp. For me, on my 6.5-inch wrist, I have found no issues with sizing, not even needing a half link. However, it should be said that the watch does come with half links if you want to even have more option to play around with the sizing of this watch. Talking about the movement of this watch, the inside of this watch has the Sellita SW330, which is a Swiss-made GMT. It has about 56 hours of power reserve, and it does feel like a step up from an SW200. When you wind the watch, the winding action is way more smooth than it is on the SW200, and with that extended power reserve, it does feel like a bit of an upgrade, and it is an upgrade. The other thing I obviously love about this watch, knowing that you know that I want the Explorer 2, this obviously is extremely Explorer 2 vibes. And Christopher Ward doesn't shy from that information. You can go on their website and you can see that it is Explorer styled. And that's one of the things that I personally respect about Christopher Ward. When Christopher Ward borrows certain design elements from other major popular brands, they're not shy to tell you who inspired them or what inspired them. For the example of the 12 that they make, they give full credit to all the watches that Gerald Genta designed, saying that Gerald Genta and the integrated bracelet style watch was the main inspiration for that watch. On this watch, they don't say directly that it was inspired by the Rolex Explorer 2, but they say Explorer style watches. And just looking at it, you obviously know what their reference was. And being, of course, that I want the Explorer 2, I love how this watch looks. The last thing that I really love about this watch is just how comfortable it is on wrist. The case size, the thickness, the proportions of the bracelet, the micro adjustment system, the clasp, everything all piled together creates a very comfortable experience when you wear it on the wrist. It's one of those watches that you kind of just forget that you're wearing until you look at your wrist or the light catches it and you're remembered again what you're wearing. It has been super delightful to have this on the wrist. And again, I wish I could keep this. Now to some things that I don't really like about this watch. It's a little bit hypocritical, but we're gonna go back to the movement here. The movement is good, and it is a solid movement with a good power reserve, but specifically on this watch, being that it is a GMT, this is what is called a collar or an office GMT. Meaning when you pull the crown out to the first position, what you can adjust is that GMT hand. So if you wanted to know a different time zone or use it for a certain function, that is the hand that you can adjust. The other option of GMTs out there is what's called the True GMT or the Traveler's GMT. You will find that on watches like the Tudor Black Bay Pro that I have, the Rolex Explorer 2, the Rolex GMT Master 2, some of the Longines GMTs. And now that Miyota introduced the Miyota 9075 movement, you can get a true GMT movement watch for under $700. Now, does it really matter to have a Traveler or a collar GMT? Honestly, it depends on you. If you're someone who travels and you want to use your watch as a genuine tool for a function, having that true or Traveler's GMT where you can isolate that local hour hand and adjust it to when you change time zones is obviously much more useful than having a collar GMT. And for me, that is my personal gripe. It doesn't make this watch bad necessarily, but it's more complicated for a manufacturer to make a true GMT watch rather than the collar GMT. And so as a fellow watch nerd, having a watch that is more mechanically challenging to make does make it more interesting and cool to me. The next thing that I really don't like is one of the specific proportions of this watch. When you're looking at this watch from a side angle or at a glance, on the inside of the dial where the rehaut is, the rehaut is very wide and tall and thick. And I believe that the reason for this is what my next gripe is, and that is how tall the hand stack is. When you look at the hand stack from an angle, you can see a small gap just above the dial before the hands even start, which further extends the hand stack to feel like it is reaching out above the dial really tall and just making the proportions a little bit interesting, I'd say. Going even more specific into the hand stack, if you compare it to watches like the Rolex Explorer 2 or my Tudor Black Bay Pro, the local hour hand is the bottom hand of the hand stack. Whereas on this watch, it is the second from the bottom one being the GMT hand. This is like a super niche nitpick of me, but I really want that hour hand to be on the very, very bottom. Something about the way that it makes the proportions of the hand stack look, and I know that this is like crazy going into depth of it, but I just prefer it. At the end of the day, does it matter? No, not at all. But hey, I feel the way I feel. The rest of this watch is just kind of preference nitpicky things. And if you break down every single thing that I have that's a preference on this watch, what it comes down to is simply the fact that it is not the Explorer 2. What I would change about this watch is the indices, the hour hand, the trident tip of the second hand, and the fact that there's a little bit more polished elements all over, making it feel just slightly less like a tool watch and a little bit more like a jeans and t-shirt style watch. This watch is absolutely capable to be a tool watch. It's got 150 meters of water resistance, it's accurate, screw down crown, all the goodies. But to me, the light catcher case doesn't scream tool watch to me. And so when you break it down to everything that I would change on the watch, I would just want to make it more like the Explorer 2. I would want the indices to be a little bit fatter and have more proportions. I want the hands to have something like a Mercedes or a snowflake hand. Like, long story short, I just really want an Explorer 2. Overall, I think this watch is phenomenal. For the price, the value for money, the finishing, what it can do, what it does, how it looks, honestly, genuinely a phenomenal watch. I absolutely think it's worth the money that you would spend on this watch, but would I personally buy one? You already know that the answer is no. Caden is set on getting an Explorer 2. That is what I plan on being my next watch, and I've genuinely enjoyed wearing this watch. But wearing this watch, I have ultimately revealed that settling for something that is not what you want, I don't feel is gonna ever suffice. If you just love how this watch looks on its own as a watch, phenomenal watch, and I think you absolutely should buy it, and I recommend it. But if you're like me and you have been obsessing over the Explorer 2 for however long, just keep saving. Once again, big shout out to Christopher Ward for sending this out for review. Sad I gotta send it back, but I'm very grateful. And I wanna know, what are your thoughts? How do you feel that this compares to the Explorer 2? Would you buy one of these watches? Let me know down below, and if you made it this far, once again, your award today is this thumbs up emoji. Peace out.